Started the recording, and with your permission, it started. So the goal for today is very simple. Since for most of you it will be the first research hackathon, we wanted to have a little meet and greet and orientation session. So just to explain how the process works, what to expect, maybe exchange some initial ideas on the possible research papers, so that when we meet in Calgary in a few days, we sort of hit the ground running. So we sort of know what we're doing and can move faster than otherwise. And so I suggest that we start with quick introductions of the people here, and we sort of need a couple of data points. One, obviously your name, perhaps where you are, university, country, but also maybe just a couple of words about your research interests. And so here, on the one hand, it will let us know better who you are, but also to maybe look for potential co-authors. So if there are people here who have the same interest as yours, you might want to consider working with them as co-authors during this endeavor. And so I can start my introduction. So just, to give you a template, feel free to add or drop anything as you will be introducing yourselves. I think most of you know me, Vas Taras. I'm at the University of North Carolina in Greensboro. My specialization is international business, broadly speaking, but my special area of interest would be international teams. And so everything related to team dynamics, team performance, especially in cross-cultural virtual context, like global virtual teams. I'm also very interested in the topics related to teaching international business, ways to improve teaching, especially through experiential projects. But yeah, that's basically where I stand. And so I'm not sure who wants to go next. You can self-select, or we can go in the order that we appear on the screen. So,
let me go next.
Moses,
So my name is Moses Akwa. I'm also at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. And my research interest is more macro. I'm a strategy person. So I do work in most of the areas in strategy and also macro research in general.
Yep. So Moses is a
I
little
have actually attended a symposium before, so
yes,
I'm familiar with some of the things, but I still wanted to sit in.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, thank you. And those who don't know, Moses is the department chair of the department that I'm in. So technically, he's my boss. All right. So who's next?
I can go next. I'm Bonnie O'Neill. I'm at Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And we were just talking a couple minutes ago. Moses and I did our PhDs at the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee. So we go way back. It's good to see you again, Moses.
Yes.
Yeah, it really is. I used the X-Culture project in undergraduate organizational behavior class, in which they do team projects anyway, and this worked out really well. I'm working with a colleague. We had collected some data on teams in general, and are working on second draft of a paper on teams. And my particular research interests fall along the lines of psychological contracts and attitudes, fairness, and we're looking at fairness in teams, but primarily micro level outcomes relative to behavior and perceptions in the workplace.
Okay.
Yep. Thank you very much, Bonnie. Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. I'm Valerie Bell. I'm sorry for my voice. I have had pneumonia this week, so I'm just getting voice back. I'm at Merrimack College in near Boston, and my interest is in international business as well. I'm particularly interested in qualitative research and in the outcomes of X-Culture in terms of jobs. Are students getting more jobs than their peers? Are they getting jobs that are better than their peers? Those sorts of things. So I'm interested also, do teams play any role in that? If they're the top team, then are they getting better jobs than their peers who may be getting lesser value jobs? Gordon and I spoke a little bit while we were in Copenhagen about our research and his presentation, and found some similar areas I think that we may be able to collaborate on. Sorry.
Yep. Yep. Well, very nice to see you again, Valerie. So not, we've seen each other just recently, a few days ago, and yeah, at a different hackathon. So yeah, very nice. Okay. Who's next?
I can be next if you can
Yep.
hear me.
Yep, absolutely.
Okay, my name is Robert Warmhoven. I'm from the Netherlands. I just started with a PhD. Field of interest is country selection, export possibilities and challenges of companies. And I'm very much look forward to this hackathon because I'm not have decided upon my topic. So like maybe with your help, I can like look for a topic that is X-culture related and combines my interest with export of companies.
And so, Robert, so your area now a little bit more strategy, or is it still going to be more about
international business?
International business.
International business.
In general. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Okay. Got it. Yep. And we have Ernesto and Oleg left.
You want me to start?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. So I am Ernesto Tavoletti from the University of Macerata in Italy. And I have been involved in X-culture for a long time. I was actually looking back, the first email that I've been receiving by VAS was actually August 2010. So actually it has been a long time. But for some reason I started actually interacting in December 2012 with X-culture. I have been involved in X-culture so for a long time. Regarding my research, that is actually the topic of our meeting. Actually, I am not entirely focused on global virtual teams as VAS and other people are here. So my origin are actually not human resource management. I have been involved in a number of fields. Actually, if I look at my teaching and actually the discipline I am inside, I am more on the side of business strategy. But nonetheless, I have been cooperating, I would say, on a number of papers in X-culture, and I am still cooperating on some of them that are actually going on. I have been publishing a paper just 1 week ago about team performance and peer evaluation that we are very proud about, the results that we had. And we have been working, for example, on ranking and performance. I have been taking part also in the Xackathon that we had in Odense, in Denmark, and I had a number of ideas up there about proactiveness and performance that I am working on with Longzhou in these days. And I was also trying to explore the relation between nationality and performance. That is not a very, I would say, theoretical, deep area, but nonetheless, it is actually, I think, an interesting area to look at, especially if we can actually put some other variables inside. So, for example, per capita income, or maybe language spoken, or the size of the country, because we do not speak about this so often, about nationality, or maybe nationality as a proxy of culture. But nonetheless, we all know that in our everyday speaking at the pub or out of the conference, we always make reference to nationality. It is actually at the front of our mind, but it is very concealed when we deal with research. And I think this is actually wrong, and we should actually put this into the open. But I have been trying to run some simulation on my SPSS in order to find some results, and yes, there are differences. So actually, nationality seems to affect the performance of the students. Now the point is, so what? And we have to try to find some explanation for this. So we should be able to integrate the X-culture database with some external variables that we already have. And so this is what I have been thinking about these days.
Yeah. One thing I will say about Ernesto is that he sort of completed one full cycle of the hackathon kind of process. So last year we had the X-Culture Symposium, just like the one we have in Calgary this year. Last year it was in Italy at the University of Macerata, and Ernesto was the host, the local professor. And we did have this same event, same hackathon in Macerata. And so Ernesto, Bob Stevens, and Lon Ju, so three of our professors, started working on a project, continued working on it after they came home. Well, for Ernesto, he stayed in Macerata, but for everybody else, when they came back from the event, then they submitted the paper to the Academy of International Business for a conference presentation, and then shortly after submitted it to a journal. And so just last week, as we were in Denmark, Ernesto's paper got the Best Paper Award at the conference, and at the same time it was accepted for publication at a journal. I think it was like conditional acceptance, but basically it will appear in print in a few, later this year. And so that's exactly what we want.
Now it has been accepted, so
oh,
it is,
all right, even better.
now, so,
yeah, so even better. So it's now basically in press. So the whole cycle was completed in 1 year, and so that's exactly the goal and the intent for this event we have this year. So with the hope that whatever we will do in Calgary, it will lead to a conference submission and then a publication, hopefully within a year or so. Yeah. All right. And so we have one more participant, Oleg. Could you introduce yourself too?
Yes. Hello, everyone. My name is Oleg. It looks like I'm only Rocky here, but nevertheless. I'm working in school, and as a teacher, I'm interested in innovative methods of teaching. And of course, X-Culture is particularly interesting for me. I'm happy that I have been participating in that project. But my recent articles, my recent researches are connected with advertising, and specifically public regulation of advertising markets. And my recent article was connected with blockchain regulation, usage blockchain in public regulation of advertising. So it's my main scientific interest, I would say.
Yeah, and that again brings us to two more sort of points or opportunities with these hackathons. One, you might be wondering how or if X-Culture can help with research on, let's say, blockchain regulation or advertisement. And so the answer is it can. We've had several publications that are not on international business or international teams per se. We just would use the data or opinions of the students to inform that line of research. For example, we just got a grant with the University of District of Columbia, so there are two professors there, to study robotics. So basically how people perceive what they call social robots, how people perceive all those toys and apps and actual robots that pretend to be people, like when your phone talks to you, so how people perceive that. And so even though X-Culture has nothing to do with robotics, we were able to incorporate a little survey, like a little experiment scenario planning into the project and ask students in different countries questions about their perception about robots in their homes. And so we got a separate approval, IRB approval for that, and so we did it as a kind of follow-up survey after the project was over. The initial results were very good, and so now we got a little grant to study it further. So it could be the same thing with blockchain or advertisement. Again, so even though the project itself is about international experience and people working in international teams, but the task may be related to, for example, some of those other topics. And we've had companies that participated in X-Culture's clients that are more about financial services or advertisement agencies. We've had those as well. So it could be more about the question that students are working on rather than observing the students as they are working on that question. So that's one point of information. And second, again, for the hackathon, even though we do have a lot of data on teams, and you're most welcome, and probably by default, you would be using the data that we already have, and as a result, we'll study either international business strategy or international teams. But again, it doesn't have to be limited to those topics. So if you have a study in mind that has nothing to do with X-Culture directly, but may still be of interest to the group that we will have at the hackathon, you can work on that idea and can get feedback from the whole group on that specific study, study design, potential data, where you can get it from, how would you analyze those data, and so on. So we don't have to be limited only to projects that stem or are based on Xculture data. It can be just about anything. So this is an opportunity to work on any study, as long as it has something to do with management or business. I guess you can still use this time to develop that study. So don't limit yourself only to studies that are based on Xculture data that are already available. So, all right. So then let me briefly explain one more time how we normally do these things. And again, we don't have the final formula yet. So if you see ways to improve the process to make it more productive and more effective, we are very open to those ideas. But so we've had so far 4 or 5 of these hackathons, and we tried different formats. Our sort of main or biggest hackathon model is the one that we just had in Denmark, and before that, a year earlier, Wisconsin. So under that model, we literally would find a quiet campus somewhere and sort of lock ourselves up for several days in the dormitories or in the conference room, and do nothing but research literally from early in the morning till late at night. So we would meet in the morning, discuss the ideas, criticize, help develop those ideas, and then split into teams and then work all day trying to develop that idea. And so usually we would have a few meetings before the event starts. Then on day one, we decide who is working on what, the final decision, and then start with the research design and then data analysis. And then every few hours we would meet up and present what we have so far, get some feedback and criticism from the group, and then, have lunch and then work some more. And so we literally would start as early as we can and work as late as we can. In Wisconsin, we were in the same dormitory, where we slept. We had the conference room. So there we were able to start literally like 8 a.m. and work until 10 p.m. In Denmark, we had to travel to the campus, so it took us like half an hour. So we would usually start around like 9 a.m. or 9:30, and then we will be done at about 6 p.m. And then go for dinner. But still, we would spend a good 8 to 10 hours a day doing research and nothing else. And so looking at, for example, our success rate in Denmark, we had a total of 11 papers that we started with. Then at some point, it looked like there were about 9 in serious development. And so we had one team at least that at the end of the conference, they already had slides and results and graphs that showed what they found. Obviously, it will still require a lot of work. We had one team that I happened to be a part of that instead of developing a new study, we worked on one that we had in development for a long time. We just never could finish it. And so we literally spent a lot of time just finishing up, writing up that paper with the goal to submit it literally on the last day of the conference. The only thing that happened was that we submitted it just a few days later after the conference because we were not sure what journal to go to. So we took a few more days to talk to the editors and then submitted like 2 days after the conference. But again, we used that time to finish a paper that had been in development for several years and just needed extra work, extra effort, and because most of the co-authors were right there on the spot, we just wrote and finished the paper. And then we had everything in between. So we had a few teams that developed fully the research design and started working on the data, but didn't have much. We had some that started writing the literature review and things like that. So it looks like we will have several conference submissions for the Academy of International Business in November. Then another format is the one that we will have in Calgary. And so this one is a little bit longer in time, but a little bit less intensive every day. So here we will have a meeting like the one we have now just to get introduced to one another. But then once in Calgary, we will have a little or shorter meeting every day, but not 10 hours a day, but only about an hour and a half, 2 hours a day. And so here the goal is not to finish the paper completely or finish the results, but rather fully develop the research design of the study, the hypotheses, and then have a very clear plan for what needs to be done to finish up the paper. So the way it will work is we will have this meeting, just for the general orientation and maybe initial paper ideas. Then once in Calgary, On the first day, we will discuss in more depth each of the research projects that we have on the table, and then try to select the most promising one and try to split into groups of 2-3 co-authors per paper so that people know what exactly they will be working on and who they will be working with on those papers. The research teams can continue working on those papers kind of in off time. So between the sessions, maybe discuss it some during lunch, dinner, maybe have a meeting after lunch or dinner in their own team, but not with the rest of the big group. And so hopefully by the end of the first day, everybody will have a very clear idea what paper they're working on, what the research question is, what the hypotheses are, what the research design might be, and so they will have kind of the general idea for the paper. Then next day, we will have another meeting and people will present those plans or research designs for the larger group and get some feedback. Again, some of those ideas may be very good and people, the other group members will say, oh, I like it, it's definitely doable, go ahead, maybe add a little this or a little that. Others may actually be criticized much more. So the feedback may be that, oh, you didn't think about this, or did you know about that paper that already did what you're planning to do, so you might want to change your focus, or make sure to include some control variables, or maybe moderator analysis, or something like this. And so again, hopefully by the end of the second session, people will have a much better idea how exactly they will execute the study. Then again, they will continue thinking about it and working on it in their smaller teams, and then we will have another meeting, and that's where people will then start, talking about maybe a specific next steps that they already started taking or plan to take. And again, hopefully the feedback and criticism that they will receive will allow them to avoid mistakes and find a more effective, shorter way to publication. And so the goal is that by the end of these several sessions that we will have over the week in Calgary, is that people will go home with one co-authors whom now they know at a much more sort of personal level, because we will have spent a whole week, going to the mountains, visiting companies, running different webinar workshops and seminars. So usually, after that week, you feel like you've known each other for a long, long time. Not like at conferences where you just had a quick discussion, but here we will have breakfast together, lunch together, dinner together, many sessions together, meetings with businessmen, entrepreneurs together. So it definitely makes, for a much closer, kind of friendlier relationship. Second, you will know exactly what kind of study you will be working on. So not only just a general idea, but very specific research questions, very specific hypotheses already sort of written on the paper. You will know what kind of data you will be using. If it's data that already exists in the Xculture database, we will even make sure that you have the data set in an Excel file before you go home. Maybe even some of you will start trying to do some simple analysis, some simple correlations, maybe a mean difference analysis, maybe regressions. Again, it will be doable. Not sure how many will get to that stage, but you will have everything you need to do that. And again, we probably will not start writing up the paper like literature review or theory, but at least the goal is that you have a very clear plan in place and you know exactly what needs to be done. You have the co-authors who know exactly what needs to be done. Again, with the goal that we will then spend August, September, October, part of November trying to prepare some sort of a draft of a paper to be submitted to the AAB conference. If you miss that deadline, then we have AUM conference deadline in January, so you have a couple more months to work on it. And then hopefully, you'll continue polishing that paper and submit it to a journal sometime in spring, maybe next summer. Yep. And so what happened also in the past was that many people would then sort of, once they meet each other and know who is working on what, many people would then launch papers completely unrelated to Xculture or completely unrelated to what we have been discussing in these symposia. So Ernesto is one of those people who started working on some projects that are not really, were not discussed at the hackathon, but then by meeting people who are interested in those topics, they were able to launch completely new endeavors, and that's what we want. We also had situations like, for example, Alfredo is not here, Alfredo Jimenez from a university in France. So he, for example, leveraged his meetings at the hackathons and Xculture symposia to then secure visiting professor positions. And so he spent some time in Chile, like Ecuador twice or 3 times even now, and then also in Australia, so a couple of times. So again, don't look at it as only a research opportunity, but also as an opportunity to expand your professional network, find future co-authors, colleagues, visiting professors or hosts, so all kinds of things, because we are all basically from the same field anyway, so why not use it for more general professional connections and development. So yeah, but that's the plan. And I'm not sure if you have any suggestions for how it can be improved, the process, or if you have any questions about how it goes. If you do, I guess now is a good time to discuss it before we move on to the next point. And then obviously those of you who have participated in the past, Ernesto, Valerie, but also Bob, you participated in something similar when we had that cruise ship conference in 2016. So I'm not sure if I missed anything or if you would like to add something. And Moses, you also attended the meetings in Miami, if I remember correctly, and then a couple other ones. So did I miss anything, or do you have any suggestions based on your experience for how we can make it more effective? Anyone? Well, I guess hopefully that means that what we're doing seems to be the best we can do with the available information. But again, if in the process you will see a way to improve it, let us know. Like, for example, one thing I would like to do, if in fact I'm determined to do next year, is to invite editors of journals to these events. And we wanted to do it this time as well, but the problem this time was that the conference in Denmark and the hackathon in Denmark were in different locations. It was like 4-hour trip by train. And so it was a little difficult to get the editors to come a few days early, travel to a different destination. So when we have the hackathon next year in Hong Kong or possibly Singapore, maybe we'll still be able to do that. And so ideally we would like the editors to be involved in the process so that they both provide feedback as we are trying to develop the study design, so that they can say something like, I love your research idea, I love what you have in mind, but I think if you want to publish it in my journal, you need to focus more on this, or maybe develop more theory, or maybe be more specific with your hypotheses, or maybe shift the topic, the focus a little bit to, I don't know, HROB, because that's what my journal publishes. And then at the end of the conference, ideally we would like to hear something like this. I really like your study proposal. If you really execute it the way you describe it and submit it to my journal, I cannot promise that it will be published, but I can promise that it will get thorough review and, hopefully positive, evaluations from the reviewers and a good chance of publication. Again, obviously, they will not be able to promise anything, but at least, indicate interest so that it's kind of more mutual relationship, as opposed to we submit and it goes in the black hole and we don't know what happens afterwards. Again, I'm not sure if it will be possible to achieve, but I don't see why not. And so we probably will be able to raise enough funds to pay for the editors, travel to the site of the symposium so that they can, be involved in this process. So we'll have to see, but it seems like we know enough or well enough the editors of the main IB journals to be able to talk about that and see what happens. So any comments or Valerie, sorry, yeah, your microphone was muted. Yeah, go ahead.
As a possible site for next year, because it's a lot cheaper than Hong Kong or Singapore.
Yes, so for the next year, we actually have like a bidding war going on. So as you know, the Academy of International Business is in Hong Kong. And I actually talked to Thomas Holt literally just a few days ago at the farewell. They had like a little dinner for people who were involved in the program, so track chairs. And so they sort of would like to make it a little bit more part of the AAB conference. So we want to do several things, and they gave tentative approval. Now I have to submit a more formal application, and they will run it by the board. But we want to do several things. One, we would like to have a separate award for the best paper that stems from an Xculture symposium. So at the final farewell ceremony, just like they have like best paper in this division and, like best QB paper. So we would like to also have like best Xculture paper. And so they like that idea because they want those papers to be submitted to the conference. And so they hope that if we have the award, more people will submit it to the conference. But for us, it's also an opportunity to promote the project and the idea. And then also they would like to have some sort of, so that we have some sort of a session that is, at the very least, talks about this open collaboration and hackathon format, but maybe even has some sort of like little hackathon as part of the conference itself. So then separately, as you know, Gordon from the Singapore Management University, so they really want to host the actual symposium, like what we have in Calgary, what we had before in Macerata, in Miami. So they would like to be the host for the student symposium, so where we have 200 students or 150 students and 50 professors. And apparently Hong Kong, Singapore, they're very close to one another, and you can literally get an air ticket for like $50 to go and visit those different places there. And so now we are in negotiations with them. They really would like to host it. The only problem we have is that it's quite expensive. So dormitories and some of the other expenses are substantially higher than what we're paying in Canada or paid in Italy. So we are trying to see if we can either get some sponsorship to keep the cost down, or if we then will have to increase the registration cost for the students or some other way to find the funding. And then at the same time, as you know, Justin Kramer from Thailand, so his school really wants to host the hackathon part. And so now we're trying to see if it's going to be hackathon in Denmark, symposium in Singapore, conference in Hong Kong, or we will combine them in some way so that there is less travel involved. We like the idea that it's 3 events in a row, because for the hackathon component, it gives us more time to work on the papers. So we can develop the research design and start working on the data at the hackathon in Thailand, pay extra $50, move to Singapore, keep working for another week in smaller teams as we are working with the students, and then move to Hong Kong AAB, and while we're presenting our research and doing all the conferencing stuff, still keep working in smaller teams and analyzing the data. And so the total thing will be probably about 2 weeks, but that will be so much more time than usual. And then the goal is that people will go home with like the first draft of the paper. If not fully developed, then at least something on paper and something that just need a few more weeks of work before it can be submitted to a conference. So we are still working on those details. It's a lot of travel. It's a lot of logistics to solve. So we'll have to see how, like, what the final format will look like. But it seems like there are enough schools interested to host it so that we may, we may have choices. So. All right, so we have, I would like to spend another maybe 10, 15 minutes. Let's talk a little bit about possible research paper ideas. Again, we don't have to commit to a specific idea at this time. We don't have to form the co-author teams, but it would be interesting to hear at least your initial ideas or papers that you think you might want to work on, maybe even with some quick feedback from the group. Just to give you a quick overview so you can do it as your homework. If you go to Xculture's website and click on the menu for researchers, one of the sub menus there will be ongoing research projects. And you will see that at this time we have about 40 papers in development. Some of them are at the stage where they will literally be submitted any day now. Some of them are just simply initial ideas, but you can get an idea of what we're working on at this time. And so most of those papers deal either with teams, so something related to the kind of big question of why some teams are more effective than other teams. Is it the team composition? Is it the leadership structure? Is it the communication style or communication tools they use? Is it the team size? All kinds of things. Cultural intelligence of the team, age of the team members, things like that. Then another line of research deals with the individual characteristics. Again, why some people are more effective than others. Is it, again, their prior international experience? Is it their cultural intelligence? Is it, whatever the individual may have that makes him or her more likely to be the team leader, receive better peer evaluations, ultimately be more effective team member. And then the third line of research deals with more strategy issues. So, it would be not so much about the team per se, but the topic that they're working on. Like, for example, we had a dissertation defended not so long ago where a student was looking at the entry modes and, choices of the countries that the teams make. And so it was not so much about the team itself, but rather the values and attitudes of the team members and how they shape the strategic management decisions they make for their clients. Or, for example, there is another paper that was launched in Denmark, kind of sustainability themes in the student reports. And what they do, they look at all of those reports that the students have submitted over the course of 10 years, trying to do some qualitative text analysis, searching for the words related to sustainability and environmental protection. And so they're trying to see if the frequency of those themes and words has increased over the 10 years we've been doing this project. Do they see it more from some countries than from others? So here they actually take the reports themselves, the decisions students had to make, and analyze those as opposed to, the team members. So there have been a few other projects that, again, look kind of at the strategic choices the teams make rather than, the team itself. So those are kind of three big ones. And then the fourth one would be more like teaching side of it. So again, what can be done to make the teaching international business more effective. So like, for example, do we want to have a team charter in place? Does it make students happier? What leads to, like, one of the projects again launched in Denmark was about students' complaint behavior. So why some students complain and others don't? Is it cultural? Is it experience? Is it age? So more kind of the teaching evaluations and complaining to the professors side. So that's a whole different body of research, and it's more for pedagogical type of journals. There is another paper that we just submitted yet again because it was rejected before, where we again look at the rank of the university and if it predicts performance of the students. So we have over the years we've had like 300 or 400 universities. Some of them are top schools, like literally globally, like in top 10, and then some schools that you've never heard about. And so the question is, do students who come from those prestigious universities, do they perform better than students who come from low-ranked schools? So again, it's more kind of pedagogical question, although has clear implications for recruitment and selections for management. So those are some of the examples. So I'm not sure if many of you are ready to discuss some of the ideas you have in mind, but if you have some ideas, let's maybe put them on the table and see what the group can say about, if it's a good idea, if it's a publishable idea. And then maybe if somebody else is interested in this idea, maybe we can start even thinking about potential co-author teams. So any suggestions, any new paper ideas?
I could start. As you were talking, Baz, I was kind of going through my head a project that I'm working on, as I mentioned, with a co-author. We had collected data with our teams in an IT class and an org behavior class, and we're trying to look at the development of a psychological contract if it existed. And actually, I just got a book that came out in 2019 that is really up to date on psych contracts, and some of it does link to the team charter idea. And so whether teams develop one or are instructed to develop one, how does that influence their perceptions of what the team members owe each other? So I don't want to assume everybody knows what a psychological contract is. It's been looked at primarily in employment between the employer and the employee, and perceptions of the obligations that the employer has towards the employee, and some of it looks at the other direction. But I'm really interested in maybe linking to the team charter and how it might influence people's perceptions relative to fairness in the teams. And from the feedback I get from my students, well, it's not fair, I had to carry this load. So for example, this past spring, the track I was in for X-Culture, the final project was due over spring break for my students. Yeah. And I knew that going in, and the students knew that going in, and so we worked throughout the semester to try to help them develop plans for what's going to happen when that comes due if they're not going to be around. And some students did a great job. Others, this person on our team said that they'd look at the plagiarism report and they didn't, so I had to do it. So there was a lot of, it's not fair, and I'm wondering if anyone has looked at that relative to either the team charter or perceptions of obligations and psychological contracts.
This is actually a very interesting topic. And so the team charter project that was launched in Denmark, so all they did, because they actually developed it quite far. So they are only comparing the cohorts when the team charter was part of the process and then when it was not. And so they did find, so they started running the data analysis, and they did find then when team charter was one of the required steps, all kinds of good things happened. So people were able to complete the project faster. There were fewer conflicts. There were all kinds of things that were, positive. But they didn't look at the specific content of the charter and the fairness component of it. And so if you really wanted to work on that, we can give you the text of all of those team charters, and you can analyze them for, the content. And I'm even sure we can even pull out the data related to fairness at the end of the project, and to see, how that plays out. Another option here, you might want to think about it, and it also applies to everybody else. If we don't have perfect data for your study yet, we will do it again in the fall. And so we can then collect the data that are specifically needed. Like, for example, again, going back to fairness, I don't think we had anything specifically on, perceptions of fairness, if people feel that it's fair or not. We have something that can be used as a proxy, like satisfaction and stuff, but it was still not necessarily, directly fairness measurement. So again, one of the things we can do is not only look at the existing data and think what we can do with them, but maybe design a perfect new study and then collect the data in the fall and then do it right, or rather than trying to do it with whatever we have, get what we need and then do it right. So again, we can spend this time in Calgary trying to design that study, then collect the data over the fall semester, and then do
that would be great.
Yeah. And we know that fairness is a very important issue. I mean, fairness, that's something that to a large extent drives free riding and dissatisfaction and motivation, and somehow we never really measured it directly. So I don't know, we can literally try to spend this time trying to design that study moving forward. So, yeah.
I'm currently on a Skype meeting, and so
Thus, may I intervene?
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Let me express some of my thinking, what is actually in my mind. I have always been very impressed inside Xculture about the strong focus that we have on actually individual performance, ethical concern, free riding. I still remember actually one of those meetings in Miami in 2015, where actually there was a very strong focus on free riding. And I understand this because we are professors and we have to give marks. And we have to give marks to individual students. So we need individual performance. But actually, this is actually a teamwork. It is not an individual work. So actually, our focus should be on team performance.
Yep.
It is like in a football team. We are coaches that are not interested in the team winning the game, but we are interested in each player having its fair compensation.
Yep.
Yes, fair compensation is okay, but actually the main focus should be on team performance. And for example, I remember at that time we had a paper that was not successful about team cohesion, because actually what was in my mind is that actually there should be a focus on cohesion and cohesion in the team and a link to performance. And for example, I was impressed, and this is linked to what I'm thinking now, I was impressed that that idea about cohesion was, for example, you remember us in the presentation that we had in Odense by the host, that there was that very good papers about actually cohesion that was actually constructed based on a number of other variables. And, it was impressive to me that the idea of cohesion is coming back from people that are actually in Denmark. So why I am saying this? Because I can see very well, even if I cannot prove this, that actually some nations and some cultural environment, and for example the US one, are very much concerned about individual performance. Yes. They are very much concerned about ethics, individual ethics.
Yes.
On the opposite, other people, like me here in Italy, or especially in the north of Europe, like in Denmark, they are much more interested in, for example, team cohesion, so the performance of the team. And I think this is interesting, and this is actually going in the direction of what is basically in my mind. So national culture here matters much more than we are ready to admit here. And that's why I think it is an area that is worth investigating. And actually, even the paper we were discussing about last year in Macerata, it is actually very linked to this area. So again, looking if peer evaluation of students that we like so much because they resemble peer evaluation in academia, because we can give marks, because we can see individual performance, but are they actually good in order to increase team performance? Maybe we are sacrificing team performance to the benefit of ethics and individual evaluation. Mm-hmm. And this is a big choice that is, I think, affected by our cultural background. And nations, I think, might be a good proxy of the different cultural backgrounds that we have. So I see what I'm thinking about nations as very linked also to that thinking about cohesion and the one about peer evaluation. And so I hope that I will find the energy and some good ideas in order to bring this idea forward in Calgary.
And actually, Ernesto, based on what you said, it seems to me that in this line of research, there may be multiple papers, because some of this may deal with the students, some of this may deal with professors. For example, some professors are so obsessed with individual performance of their students that they literally always torture me about, keeping track of who did what. So when we submit the report, they don't want to see the report. They want to say, okay, which of these parts was written by my student? And I say, well, in many cases, there was no single part that was written by student. Everybody kind of contributes everywhere. And they say, oh, but how would I then give the grades? Or when there was a plagiarism in the report, they say, well, that's okay, but tell me, was it the part that was my student, done by my student? And I'm like, well, it's a team. Your student was responsible.
Yes, I think that the metaphor of the football team or the sport team is actually a very good one.
Yeah.
So coaches that are looking at individual performance and sacrificing the team performance, this is crazy actually. But nonetheless, it looks normal to us because we are professors. But actually, when we are professors in teamwork, we should actually forget that we are professors somehow, and we should start being coaches in a way. Yeah. And some cultures are more ready to this jump, some others much less. And one of the culture that is less ready is probably the North American one, in my view. But it is not the only one, of course.
So what I hear from you and Bonnie, we have two main themes going on here. One is the general perceptions of fairness and how what predicts the perception of fairness and what fairness perceptions leads to, but also in the context of individual versus team sort of evaluation, or evaluations based on individual versus team performance. And again, it appears that people from different cultures may prefer different approach here. Some may still want to emphasize the individual component, while others may believe that it's all about the team performance, whereas individuals are only integral parts of the team. So it seems to me that not only it's a very good topic that can lead to publications, but I really would like to know the answers, because it may allow us to better design the project itself. So it has very important practical implications.
Well, and I think to build on that, again, in this other project that a colleague and I were working on, we're coming from our art students, college students, this is their first real example of working in a team where the actual project itself is the outcome, which is just like what they're going to face in the workplace. And so transferring those skills from its culture, and sure, it's fine that you did more work and the other person didn't, and you don't think that's fair, but ultimately in the workplace, that it's all about performance, like Ernesto was saying.
Yeah. Well, let's think about specific research questions and hypotheses. And again, we can then look in Calgary, one, whether we already have some data that can be used to write a paper, but two, also design a study moving forward. And again, it may involve additional questions for the students, but potentially also separate interviews of the professors. So just to see what their philosophy is, maybe institutional requirements at their schools. We did have at least one instance in the past where the professors told us that they cannot use Xculture as part of the grade because at their university it's literally forbidden to use team-based projects for the individual grades or marks. So it may even be some cultural and institutional pressures that require how performance appraisal and evaluation is done. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's a very interesting line of research, and it seems like we have at least 2 people interested. Maybe more will join once we're in them. Yeah. Any other ideas? So ideally, we want to finish in the next 5-10 minutes. So any other ideas that you want to put on table for possible research projects?
I have one. I'm thinking like about country selection. Like students, they have to choose for a country where the culture company is exporting to. I'm curious, like what tools or what theory do they use? Because like we have like 600 groups, they might all use the same methods.
Yeah.
A theory, or is it like very hands-on, like we go to Germany because it sounds so nice, or like is there like something that like a model that they all use, or are they using 600 different models, and how do they choose? Which criteria do they use? Is there like something like
my students, they all want to go to Germany. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and that's a very interesting question. Well, first of all, over the years, we've had probably about 10,000 teams. So that's about 10,000 choices, of countries. And we can literally just start with simply mapping them. Maybe of those 10,000 choices, 5,000 were Germany, who knows, or some other country. Second, even without getting into the specific teams, we can look at, do countries that have, stronger economy or more positive image. So do they get more, do they get chosen more often? But then the important thing is that every time they choose a country, they have to explain why. Like we literally would have like 2 pages of explanation. So they have to say, in fact, in most cases, we even require that they first select like 3 countries that they're considering, and then they make a comparison and select one. So they literally have to specify the criteria for selection that they had. And again, we can easily classify them and see if it's, all about economy or political stability or lack of competition, or simply, again, maybe they just like Germany. Everybody, Germany has a positive image, or Switzerland, or I don't know, Japan. And maybe nobody wants to go to Ukraine or some other country because, the country always has someone, shaky image in the press. Even though there may be, lots of business opportunities, people like, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't sound sexy, whatever that means. So yeah, that's a very, very interesting topic. And then we can even analyze it by industry or by origin of the students. Maybe Italians always want to go to Germany no matter what the product is, but Germans always want to go to, I don't know, the United States or I don't know, the Netherlands or something else.
Or like you said, like they have to choose 3 countries, and do they Germany and then like 2 random countries that somehow never selected. Like some students, they come up with 10 countries, and you can already see that like 9 countries, they're just random, or maybe not.
Plus, we do have information about the country of the client, so where the company is located. There was this very interesting study that I use in my IB courses, where they analyze like 20 different indicators that predict trade between nations, like common border, common currency, common language, a prior colony metropoly type of relationships, prior wars, and things like that. And they find that when the countries, have common border, trade increases like 30%. If it's common currency, like 25%, and so on and so forth. And we can look at that as well. So we know what country the client is located in, and then we can see a student selecting something that is nearby, that has a similar economic situation, that has a similar, I don't know, language, currency, or they go as far as possible. And so again, I'm sure there will be, and it's very easy to classify. I mean, we do have those countries like as a separate column. So it will be very, very easy to analyze those data. And it seems like we never ever looked at it. So that's very interesting. So that would be your pure strategy. You can even, add to that the entry mode, and again, see if they propose like wholly owned subsidiary if the countries are nearby, and maybe joint venture when they're further away, and maybe just direct exporting when it's, very different institutional environments or something like that. So you can add that whole additional layer of information on the, recommended entry mode versus the country, characteristics. Actually, that would be in fact, again, I bet there will be several papers coming out of this. I mean, you can do one specifically on, personal characteristics of the students, then characteristics of the client company, then just simply a random, abstract analysis of what countries get most popular, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm surprised that nobody thought about that before, because it seems like such an obvious question. Somehow we always sort of analyze it. Once we have the reports, we're like, okay, done with this semester. Here are your reports. And we never really analyze those choices that students made. So.
Yeah, that's
By the way, Oleg, you mentioned something about marketing. Same thing. So every single report, all 10,000 of them, had something on marketing. So they had to decide where they will advertise, how much they will spend, will it be advertisement on TV or radio or social media? And we don't even know what percentage. I know that most teams at least recommend some social media advertisement, but we don't know the exact percentages. We don't know what social media they recommend, how they're changing over time. Is it dependent on the country or product? So it would be an interesting analysis. So, and do older students recommend TV and younger students recommend social media or something like that? So we never analyze those choices, even though we do have the data. So.
Yes, moreover, I can propose even one more topic on Hackathon, because during last months I have been preparing a chapter on textbook on global virtual collaboration, as you remember.
Yep.
And the topic of my chapter was implementation of the GVT project into school curriculum. Yeah, and one of my idea was to use integrated lessons during such implementations, because integrated lessons allow to learn nature and society from different perspectives, for better understanding of the relationships. And I even provided some examples, like we can integrate political geography, economy, and even marketing in one lesson. Because every student, every team have to choose a country, as you said, market, national market, to research law sphere, to research taxation, and to research different marketing tools which could be used. So I think it can be perspective topic.
Yeah, on the kind of pedagogical side, absolutely. Again, as long as we work out the design, chances are we already have some data that can be used, but if not, again, we can collect additional data on this and maybe even embed some experiments in our project design so that we can, do it right and test those propositions experimentally, see what works better, what leads to better learning. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, it actually seems like we have three very different themes. One is much more kind of fairness, teams versus individuals, so kind of HR type of deal. And then we have pure strategy, country selection, entry mode selection, and then pedagogical component, which is great. I mean, we want that diversity. Yeah. All right, well, so we are pretty much out of time, so it seems like we have some ideas on the table, and given that there will be about a dozen people involved in the project, and we usually want like 3 or so co-authors per team, per research project. It seems like, if we work on these 3, that would be a good number, maybe add one more at some point. What I will do is I will set up a Google Docs file and try to summarize the ideas that we discussed. And then if you want to add anything to that, either as a new project on a new page or as some additional ideas and kind of depth and details to the 3 projects that we just discussed, please do so, and I will share the recording with the other people who couldn't attend live, so hopefully they'll have some additional ideas. But it seems like we have a very good start, and we'll have some topics to discuss once we're there. So, all right, well, thank you so much, and yeah, I guess we'll see each other in like 5 days or something like that, even less than now. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.